Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
With the COVID situation getting no better by the day, wouldn't we like to get rid of this problem, this discussion, at least for a day? How desperately I would want that. Unfortunately, we can't do it because that is the dominating reality of today and you can't get away from it. So I looked for something other than COVID that we could talk about. And I looked around the world. So I did find a couple of interesting things which actually might be funny with what's happening in the world. And I thought that will give us a break from COVID. I will talk about that. But before that, I will begin again with something foreign, close enough but foreign, but which is not so funny and which is still got to do with COVID. So we will talk today about the COVID situation in neighbor Nepal, a very important neighbor for us with which we have many sentimental, spiritual, political interests and commonalities. Also a country which has a very large border with India, which is an open border. So what happens in India, particularly in the poorest states of India, that is Uttarakhand little bit and then Uttar Pradesh and Bihar, all that reflects into what happens in Nepal as well. Now Nepal, I was just looking at the data on Nepal and I was astounded to see how Nepal's graph has gone up for coronavirus. In fact, if you take out the figures and if you just see the inclines of the graph, it is exactly the same way as India's graph had gone up, just trailing India by say about a week or 10 days, at the most 2 weeks. So a month back, Nepal was seeing about 100 cases a day. Now Nepal seeing yesterday 9,100 cases in a day. Now Nepal has a population of about 3 crores. So on that base, 9,100, just expand that to India's population. You will come to a figure that will be just over 4 lakhs. So that is exactly the same number of cases as say in India over Nepal's population base. It doesn't look good at all. In fact, it might look as bad as India. It may be worse because Nepal's testing is much poorer than India. Nepal's healthcare system is much more primitive even than India's. India has 1 doctor per 1,000 people. Nepal has 0.7, and a lot of those doctors are also in Nepal and in India in the definition of such as they are. Also, Nepal is a country with very little hospital facilities. It just has 1,395 ICU beds in the whole country and 480 ventilators. Now, this is a country, it's among the poorest countries in the world, and that's now looks like being hit as badly as India, if not worse. It might be getting worse. In fact, so much so that the Prime Minister of Nepal, Mr. Oli, who until now had been promoting magical treatments, fantastic treatments or treatments coming out of fantasies for COVID, like gargle your throat with guava juice, not even guava juice, guava leaves boiled in water, stuff like that. He is now asking for international aid. He's also called out his armed forces. Now look at the situation in Kathmandu. If you look at Kathmandu, and I'm sharing a couple of stories with you, one from Washington Post, one from Guardian, couple of stories, you will see them, one from CNN, that Kathmandu, the southwestern regions of Nepal, if you see the map, border India, India's plains, the Indo-Gangetic plains to be more specific, the southwestern region and the west of Nepal is looking very bad. In fact, yesterday, positivity rates in Nepal for tests were 47%. That is disaster zone. For comparisons, last couple of days, at some points, we have found last few days in Bengaluru city, positivity rates going up to 50%. What that means is 2 things. One, that a lot of people are infected, and second, that you are testing too little, so your ability to test is not good enough, or that you are not inclined to test more to curb your numbers, which amounts to fooling yourself. So 47%. Before that, even for a week, there is a story in CNN that tells us that Nepal's numbers have been about 44%, and this data they've got from the Nepalese Red Cross and Red Crescent Society. Now, Nepal also has a big problem with vaccination because it got some vaccine doses donated by India, but its purchase did not happen because of many other problems. There are stories in the Nepalese press that I am not going into how that purchase was bungled. There was a private agent involved and something supposedly went wrong, but because I don't know enough, I will not talk about it. The fact is, a lot of people in Nepal are now scurrying around for their second shots and they don't know where to get them. You might say some of that's happening in India also, but worse is happening in Nepal. In India, I think chances are all those who got your first shot at some point within, if not in 4 weeks and 6, maximum 8, will get their second shot, but Nepal's getting much worse. What surprises me is how come the Chinese have not drowned that little country with their own vaccines. That's a little bit of a mystery for me, but maybe the Chinese are on their way and something will happen. I'm referring to the story that quotes Alexandra Mathion, who is the Asia Pacific Director for Red Cross and International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent, who says how badly things are, how badly off Nepal is at this moment, and also the crisis they are having with their medical system, vaccinations, etc. Also, there is Netraprasad Timsiana, who's the boss of the Nepalese Red Cross, who's also been quoted. Now, from 100 to 8,000, the Nepalese numbers took about 2 weeks, 3 weeks going up. Now it's 9,100, and graph, as you can see, our favorite, unfortunately, our favorite description here is not a happy one, a hockey stick graph. So it's gone up like a hockey stick graph, and given how badly off Nepal is in terms of medical facilities, even worse than India, that is saying a lot. India is among the most primitive, and India is a strange country. So I'm digressing for 1 second. India has some of the most modern, cutting-edge medical facilities in the world, but also really bad and primitive medical health facilities when it comes to public health, and also in rural India and poorer parts of India. Nevertheless, Nepal has also made many of the mistakes that India has made, because what is it? There is something about us in the subcontinent that makes us blind about religion and tradition. So each one of us thinks that my religion, my God, my gods will protect me from the virus. They don't, because they don't bother with those who take chances with a bad virus in God's name. So just as we allowed Kumbh to go on, we've also seen pictures lately of a big church Christian congregation in Kerala where 2 of the people who participated have died now, several turned positive. We see pictures every evening coming from Hyderabad for Eid shopping, or people coming out at iftar time, large crowds, nobody's bothered about masks and all. There is a price to pay for all that. So what did Nepal do? They allowed 2 big festivals. So one festival is something called Pahan Chade. Pahan Chade literally means welcoming a guest home. Now this is to also do with the legend of Lord Shiva. It's a 3-day festival. So you welcome the guest home, essentially maybe welcome God home, and then you feast and party, and then you take out big processions, big crowded processions with tiny replicas of temples, very much like our Durga Puja processions also. So these processions are carried out. Nobody stopped this. This went on in the middle of April. So 14th day of the dark phase of the moon, the lunar month of 5th lunar month of Nepalese calendar. This is held every year. So this year, this was April 12. April 12 was the 3rd day and the grand finale. So see these pictures that I've taken from Kathmandu Post, and how crowded the place is and how reckless people are. And then you can see that there is a direct connection to what happened after that. Immediately around that time, at Bhaktapur, which is again an ancient part of Kathmandu, extended Kathmandu, Bhaktapur has these beautiful temples and monuments. Many of them were brought down, including the big tower of Bhaktapur called Dharahara Tower, which was brought down by the earthquake, the great Gorkha earthquake of 2015. It has just now been rebuilt. So it's been rebuilt rebuilt in the middle of the crisis, unmindful of the crisis. Prime Minister Oli was there to inaugurate or dedicate the newly rebuilt tower to the nation. At the same time, another religious festival was allowed in Bhaktapur, that is called Biscuit Jatra. Now, Biscuit Jatra has its own tradition. I will not go too much into that, except to say that it's also called the festival of dead serpents. But once again, religion, festival, god or gods means crowds. Crowds means crowds of the faithful. Crowds of the faithful are not the smartest. They are not immunologists. They are not virologists. They are God-fearing, but they are not virus-fearing because they think they've got God at their back. It doesn't work like that. We've seen it often enough, but this was also repeated in Nepal, and Nepal is also paying for it now. In fact, as I'm talking to you, I stopped because a big plane is flying overhead. My house is in the in the flight path from Delhi airport, and this plane is particularly noisy because I can see it's a C-17 Globemaster of Indian Air Force, which is hauling in and out supplies these days to handle the COVID crisis. It's a big plane with big engines, so makes a lot of racket. So that, I think, that provides a good sound effect for what we are talking about right now. Now, normally, I would have expected some political forces in Nepal to start jumping up and down by this point, blaming India. That is not happening, but the Nepalese Foreign Minister Pradeep Gewali, he is saying that, look, unless you close all the border with India, which is not possible because India and Nepal have open borders, you don't even need passports, visas, nothing. That is the old India-Nepal treaty. And it's a very, very, even in terms of terrain, a very open border, hardly patrolled. Now, some restrictions have been put in, but also given how poor the population is on either side, it is difficult to enforce these restrictions. So, Nepal is now becoming the new problem zone in this subcontinent. It's much too close to India. There are too many families, part of which lives and works in India, part of which lives and works in Nepal, and there is a lot of toing and froing and movement, also pilgrimages. So just to give you a little sidelight going ahead, that a lot of devotees from Nepal also came from Kumbh Mela and went back and turned out to be infected. And once again, the virus doesn't care for hierarchy, rank, royalty, nothing. So among those who got infected and had to go to a hospital were the former King Gyanendra and his wife Queen Komal. So Gyanendra Shah and Komal Shah both tested positive after having gone from the Kumbh. So Nepal now is the crisis zone. I suspect, unfortunately, we'll hear more about Nepal as days pass. Now, I told you also that I will also take you to some foreign stories, so some story far away, a distant foreign country, which is actually funny because this Nepal story was not funny. So the funny story is, although I think there will be many French people and many people in Britain who will say, oh, funny, this is not funny. In fact, if you see British tabloids, even French tabloids, but we don't know the language, but if you see those tabloids, it looks like the two countries, the two allies, friends, Britain and France, were on the verge of a war. There was no such thing as a war going to happen, but what happened was something that you might call the war of the scallops. Scallops, as you know, is a seafood. It comes out of mollusks. You prise open the shells and get the meat inside. So apparently the seas in the English Channel between the French coast and the British protected island of Jersey. Jersey until 2019 used to be a tax haven. It is not now, but other islands, and there are other islands, Channel Islands, which have been famous or infamous for being tax havens. Jersey is just an island of 108,000 people. It is not a part of United Kingdom, but it is protected by United Kingdom. It's one of those three regions or three islands which have a special relationship with the British Empire. So the coast of the island is about 14 kilometers away from the French coast. So before Brexit, fishermen from both countries or all these regions were allowed to fish anywhere because all waters were common. Now that Brexit has taken place and there is a new treaty, the government of Jersey, which is not the government of Britain, it's an autonomous government with its own parliament, its own Supreme Court, etc., its own judiciary. So the government of Jersey decided that they are not going to give free passage to all French fishermen who come into their waters or waters close to their coast, because they come in, they take away a lot of scallops. That's the reason I call it the war of the scallops. The problem with the Jersey farmers was, fish farmers was, that we are fishing, now that Brexit has taken place, we are not allowed to take this stock of scallops that we catch here to the French coast to sell there. Whereas French fishermen come to our side, pick up scallops from our sea floor and take it back and sell in the same market. So either you give both the same freedoms as we had before Brexit, or French fishermen also follow the rules post Brexit, which means they first give us the evidence that they were fishing in these waters earlier, and second, they must take licenses for fishing. On that, there was fracas, and hundreds of thousands apparently of French fishing boats came and laid siege around the capital port of Jersey. To prevent them from blocking the port, Royal Navy sent a ship or two and a few gunboats, as did the French Navy. So the gunboats were parading that harbor from both sides, France and Britain. Now we know that in the past, in fact, the French and the British fought many wars in the past, and they have this strange history of fighting wars, then making peace. In fact, I remember I mentioned it in the Katta Clutter episode when I talked about Pondicherry, on how as France and Britain fought in Europe, the British forces also attacked the French settlement of Pondicherry and captured it because it was a tiny settlement. But after the war, there was peace in Europe and it was handed back to the French. So some of that history is there, and that's why it becomes very funny. I see some coverage in the Washington Post, for example, which is quoting Josh Daring, who heads the Jersey Catch Fishing Company, who says, look, I saw in the morning so many red lights, sirens, so many other warning signs. It looked like there was an invasion going on because all these French fishing boats came in and laid siege around the port, the leading port, the capital port of Jersey Island. That is when HMS Tamar arrived there, and some French gunboats also arrived there. And the French Minister for the Sea, Annick Girardin, she said that, look, if this goes on, we might cut electricity to Jersey. Now, Jersey is 14 kilometers from France. It doesn't generate any electricity. Its electricity comes from France, supplied by underwater cables. Now, no such thing has happened, and I think right now the temperatures are coming down. But this is quite a fun interlude in global politics, just at a time when G7 foreign ministers, where our foreign minister was also an invitee, had just met in London, and they were extolling the virtues of international diplomacy, and all that could be done through diplomacy. You had a near fracas breaking out between two strong post-World War allies over something as tiny as fishing rights. But you know, fishing stuff is very sensitive. For example, in this case, fishermen from Jerry are saying that, look, these Frenchmen come every day and they pick up 100 tons of scallops from our waters, our sea floor, and they take it away and sell on their coast. Whereas we are fishing in the same waters, picking up the same scallops, but we can't sell it on the French coast because we are not allowed after Brexit. So what the hell is going on? But fishing rights, as I told you, is serious business in politics. In fact, you keep reading these stories all the time of Pakistanis capturing Indian fishermen and Indian fishing boats, Indian Coast Guard capturing Pakistani fishermen and Pakistani fishing boats. Most of that action takes place in Sir Creek area between Sindh and Gujarat, because that's an area where our maritime boundaries are a little bit troublesome. They are not very clear, and fishermen keep going into each other's territory. So what is that fight about? That fight also is over fish. It's over red snapper. So next time you have your red snapper at a Chinese restaurant, you remember how fishermen on both sides jostle with each other, going into what either country sees as its territory to pick up red snapper from there, because that narrow channel is very rich in red snapper, and that's when the two coast guards come into action. So fishing is serious business. Also, on a half funny side, if countries have to go to war, wouldn't you rather that they went to war over things like fishing rights, sports, things like that, instead of religion, instead of ideology, or instead of territory, boundaries? So I will conclude with something that I once heard on a BBC discussion on why men kill men. I mean, today you will say why people kill people. And Ian Botham, the cricket all-rounder, he was one of the participants in that discussion. And he said, I don't care if men kill men as long as they do it for the right reasons. Like which football club you support. So on that note, I thought we still need something to smile about in these grim times. On that note, I will conclude this. But before I conclude, I will also tell you. So if you are wondering from where I found all these interesting nuggets on such obscure subjects, I have to thank young Arhana Sethi. She's a 16. She's a class 12 student from Sri Ram School in Gurgaon. And she's the one who's put this stuff together. So if you are a student either in a school or a college and would like some work with us, would like to intern with us for a month, 2 months, 3 months, 6 months, please do write to us. We'll be quite happy to have you work with us. And remember, once you walk in through the door, that is metaphorically because we are all working from home now, then we take you as seriously as we take anybody else. So once again, for today's Katta Clutter, thank also Arhana Sethi.